We are the Keyboard Samurai, a podcast focused on sharing insights to help those working in cybersecurity companies, be them technology or services. Each session, your host, Will Klusovsky, aka Will Clue, sits down with professionals in our industry to illuminate topics that will help your security biz, team, or self be better. Let's hack into it now. Hey everybody, Will here. Thanks for joining once again. Today we are joined by Ross, who I would call the cybersecurity VC whisperer to some degree, maybe. Ross, why don't you give us a 20-30 second spiel of who you are and why we care?
Yes, super happy to be here. The why you care question is the one that you will have to answer. I will pass on that. But who am I? I'm an operator. I'm a product guy. I have been in product management and go-to-market for about a decade, focusing on different industries. Ended up in cybersecurity. Fell in love with the space. Fell in love with the industry, with the people who are working in this industry, and been super active in the ecosystem ever since. Have a fairly active blog about the business side of cyber, not so much VC, but the business side of the industry.
Right.
And recently published, about a year ago, published a book about building cybersecurity startups. So been quite active in different ways.
Yeah, congrats, SANS award, right?
That is correct, yes.
Yeah, congrats on that. That's awesome. So as we're talking about, especially in the product space, like what do you see right now is going to be the next, aside from AI, which I mean, I know there's going to be elements of AI in this conversation. We can't avoid it, but kind of what do you see as being the next thing that other business owners maybe want to be thinking about, looking at, or maybe need to develop?
That is a good question. I mean, fundamentally, I think I'm not necessarily a skeptic. I don't generally consider myself to be one, but at the same time, when you look at the past, 5-10 years of the cybersecurity industry development, and the kind of problem areas that people are actually paying attention to, you come to realize very quickly that although the technologies have advanced and we as an industry have moved forward quite a bit, the fundamentals of security haven't really changed, right? Like people are still paying attention to the very same problem areas that they have been paying attention about a decade ago. Maybe there are some changes, maybe now identity is something that people put more front and center, while some of the other aspects of more traditional infrastructure stacks have faded a bit away, or just moved to the back seats. But at the same time, people are still paying attention to endpoint, they're still paying attention to network, they're still paying attention to cloud security, to email security. So like all the very same areas are true. And then if you look at the go-to-market and from more the startup lenses, the very same methods that have worked a decade ago are still the ones that are making companies money, right? We have tried a lot with open source in security, and we have seen that with some exceptions it hasn't exactly transformed into this game changer for security startups. We have tried product-led growth, and again, there are benefits to it. There are ways in which security companies can benefit from exposing their products and from getting prospects and customers to get started with their products quickly, but even that has not really become a game changer. So for the most part, the way products are being bought is like, at least from the outside, it still very much looks the same. It's still a top-down sell. It's just that now you also have to get the security practitioners on board. And when you're looking at the industries that are worth looking at, it is still basically the same industry. So I think cybersecurity has been more stable than than many people realize.
Yeah, it's interesting because as you're saying that, I'm thinking about it. I'm like, yeah, as the CISO somewhere, I'm still looking at my risks the same way I have been forever. It doesn't matter that we have next gen firewalls for the last 20 years now or something. They're still next gen, but now that IDS is still built in, and the firewalls and NAC and all this stuff is now in one tool, it doesn't matter. We're still looking at data, we're still looking at network, all that stuff the same way, still looking at users the same way. I find it interesting because I feel like we have done this tennis match of going back and forth between like the endpoint and the network. Way back in the day, it was antivirus and endpoint. And then it was like, okay, put everything in the network and monitor everything through firewalls and rule sets and web filtering. And then, we've got EDR now. We're back at and then now we've got NDR and net flow analysis making a resurgence. So It's interesting how
Are
that
we?
cycle.
Are we
I don't know.
truly seeing?
I've seen people
Okay.
talking about NDR, and I do honestly go, why don't we? Doesn't that exist already? But I don't want to shed too much light on my ignorance.
Interesting.
So within that, sort of talking back at those cycles, like I'm a big fan of. I love looking at all the kind of the analyst reports and stuff, and I really love the hype cycle that Gartner puts out.
Mhm.
And I think it's good for service providers, especially, to kind of look and see what's gaining traction to decide, okay, this is where it's okay to start to invest in automated pen testing now. Like it's a real thing, right? So I guess when you look at that, like, what's your viewpoint on that hype cycle and those things that are coming and emerging, and what's interesting to you?
Yeah, I think it depends what kind of lenses am I looking at it from. If it's if the question I'm asking myself is like, hey, what's new out there? Like, what are some of the areas that I would be looking at or I should be looking at? Then I think turning to the hype cycle is the right way to do it. Right? You get like hundreds and thousands of analysts doing the work for you. I think what is very important to keep in mind is that Gartner serves the largest enterprises.
Right.
And so when Gartner is putting out a report, that is a report that gives you a fantastic insight into what, Fortune 500, Fortune 1000 is doing. That said, although Fortune 1000 are indeed the most sophisticated security buyers, they're not necessarily representative of the whole market.
For sure.
And so I think if you're an MSSP, I don't know to what degree that is actually relevant to you, because you're probably not serving JP Morgan, you're probably not serving Capital One, and the kind of companies that you are serving are not thinking about, AI and how AI is going to enable them to do more with less. They're thinking about how to implement MFA. They're trying to understand what is MFA and why should we even implement it. So there is a lot of disparity in the security market, and that, I think, is one of the most interesting challenges. When every day when we are talking about security innovation, what comes to mind immediately is how can we design some new technical capabilities? How can we move the top 1 or 2% of the market, towards that line of maturity where they can get everything covered? Well, the reality of the space is that the rest of the market, probably the rest, 95, 97%, are the types of companies that aren't really looking for technical innovation. They're looking for things to be delivered in ways that are easier, to navigate, easier to deploy, easier to understand, and also that have a real return on investment. Because when you're a large enterprise, you are most likely going to have a ton of compliance requirements, a ton of just must have, must satisfy constraints and expectations. And so there are real security budgets that get allocated towards cyber. Well, if you're moving towards smaller and smaller organizations, which constitute the majority of the market,
For sure.
then you quickly come to realize that if you can convince a manufacturing facility to pay for a security control, that security control better truly have a fantastic ROI, right? The way you have to think about security is different. So I do find hype cycle incredibly useful to understand, what the top 3 or 4% of the market is thinking about. But I also try very, very hard, although often unsuccessfully, to be mindful that that perspective is just one of many.
Right. No, I totally, and you're absolutely right. I get that. It's like a, when the enterprise is spending money on it, then we know it's real, right? But as you said, when you get down into the mid market and the smaller business, like, they just want security to go away. So, and I know I've talked to a lot of startups, and that's kind of, they're making something for the small business here, one click security, or their job is simplification. It's a very different type of innovation. They're not always creating a new tool or a new technology. They're making it easier to deploy, or easier to manage, or easier to deal with, right?
Yeah.
Is
Indeed.
is that something you see in the startup space, where they're targeting more of that? Like, again, because it's the largest chunk of the market. Is that really where they tend to be going after things?
Not so much in security. I mean, the sad reality about the cybersecurity space is that, yes, the vast majority of the market is not Fortune 500 and Fortune 1000 enterprises. That said, they're also not the ones that actually spend real money on cyber.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you think about your total addressable market, it is sadly a simple reality that if you're trying to make money, you have to go after mid-market and you have to go after large enterprises. There's obviously like a large number of SMBs out there, but also trying to convince those SMBs to spend anything at all on security is hard. A lot of them don't really have access to security talent. Well, I will say the vast majority have no access to security talent. They access security through their service providers, like managed service providers, MSPs. Some will have an IT person or a team of several IT people, of which maybe one at best, once the team is big enough, is paying some attention to cybersecurity controls and cybersecurity risks. So the vast majority of the startups are indeed focused on the large enterprises. That said, what I have been seeing is that over the past several, I want to say several months, but really it has been probably several years, at least 2 years after the release of ChatGPT, there is much more interest from the VC space, from the VC ecosystem, in what they define as what is it? Not software as a service, but service as software, right? So this idea that you can take a type of service that used to require a lot of manual work, such as security operations centers, such as some of the value delivered by MSSPs, and you can automate a lot of that manual work so that you can now finally start achieving economies of scale that you weren't able to do with services before. So
Right.
that is one of the trends that I have been seeing, and obviously because more and more investors are starting to get excited about services, that means more capital is flowing into services enabled by AI, which is going to lead to more of those services being targeted towards small businesses.
Right. That's a unique spin. And as you said it, like I think I'd heard that terminology before, but as you said it, I immediately started thinking of companies that I've looked at and talked to where, leveraging AI, we're able to create a team of GRC analysts for you to, run your program, or we're able to automate all your, tier 1 SOC stuff. And so, and it's interesting because in the past, it's almost impossible to get a VC to pay for services-based organization. If you don't they don't want to invest in another consulting firm, right? Or another MSP.
Correct.
They want you to have some cool cutting edge technology. So now that we can use the technology to actually provide the services and reduce the headcount, that's a unique perspective. So you're saying they're more open to that now, right?
100%. And I think it does make sense because most customers don't really care about the means by which you're delivering an outcome, right?
100%.
If you're a customer looking for a security solution, you couldn't care less if the solution you're buying is 80% services and 20% product, or vice versa. What you care about is that you're paying a reasonable amount of money and you're getting the outcome you were looking to get. And so what I believe is that we are seeing it now, and we are going to start seeing it more and more when the line between products and services is going to continue to blur. Mm-hmm. Because really product companies are incentivized to add services as a part of their offering, right? They need to upsell, and they need to make it easier for customers to realize the value of their solutions. That is why a lot of the EDR companies have a very strong services arm. Like a lot of the companies in other segments of the market are also starting to develop the services arms. And then on the other hand, if you're a services provider, you want to add the product component because it's going to give you better exit multiples. It's going to give you better, valuation multiples. And so for that reason, you start seeing services providers continue to buy products, and then Which, by the way, like several weeks ago, like Arctic Wolf announced the acquisition of BlackBerry of Silence, and you're going to start seeing more and more of those examples. And then after probably a decade or so, I don't think we will even be talking about products versus services. We'll just be talking about security solutions, because so many service providers will have a product component, and so many product companies will have a services component.
Yeah, I have to agree. I've been, I'm a firm believer that, well, the sales market, the sales side of the house tells you whichever one you sell, you need to have partners in the other, right? If you have a services organization, you need to have product that you can sell. And the product organizations need to have, opportunities for those service providers, whether they're partnering or doing it in-house. But you have to manage it internally differently, because it's that roadmap is different for services than it is for product. That selling cycle is different. How you enable those teams, how you go to market, it's all very, very different. So it is still two business models, and I've seen organizations struggle with that. But it's interesting you say that about, we're seeing those lines blur, because I've witnessed that firsthand. I've seen several companies now I've been very close to where, they buy a product because it enhances their service capability, right? And then they have to tiptoe around, like, how competitive is it with these other partners we have versus just making our product better. And then with a lot of other organizations knowing they have to rely on the channel for sales, right? A lot of these big product companies have realized they can't get to scale fast enough. And as a startup, if you're targeting that mid-market and that SMB space, you're never going to be able to hire enough salespeople. You have to have a channel, right?
The economics, and just the customer acquisition cost of trying to go direct and sell to the small customers just doesn't make sense, right? If you're paying a salesperson a six-figure salary, and they spend weeks and weeks to close a contract with 50 endpoints, it's just not going to work. Like, just the math doesn't add up.
Yeah, it's very challenging to do that. That's interesting. So, where do you see any areas so I like the idea of, like, blurring it with that, kind of looking at the landscape today. Do you see any areas that are kind of underserved, whether that's in the technology services or a certain market, or just anywhere in particular where you see, like if Ross had a couple $1 million in the bank and wanted to start a company, what would you don't have to give away any secrets, but where do you think the next thing's going to happen?
Yeah, no, I mean, transparently, I don't know if there are any market segments in security that could be described as underserved. I mean, realistically speaking, we have, like, the market is incredibly competitive. The number of companies in just every market segment that are trying to make things work and trying to build something innovative is incredibly high. So I don't think it would be fair or even realistic to expect that there is like a hidden treasure somewhere out there. What I do believe is that despite having a large number of companies in the security space, there are still plenty of unsolved problems. And there are plenty of unsolved problems, the solution to which is not about devising some innovative technology, and it's about taking what already exists and making it simpler, making it easier, and so on and so forth. As far as the market areas are concerned, like, I think it comes down to the fact that there are really, people are paying attention today to the very same areas that they were paying attention to before, right? Email is still a problem. Identity, like, different aspects of identity are still problematic, and not for the lack of trying. It is just complex. It's just a complex problem, and it's not easy to solve. So I think the mistake many people make is they look at the market and they say, oh, there seems to be an open space here, a gap here, because, like, all the existing companies are just not doing a good job, and customers are complaining. And that is true, right? Like, that most certainly presents an opportunity in the market. But the harsh truth is that for many of those problems, the reason there are no good solutions is because they're really hard problems to solve.
Right.
That's really what it comes down to, right? Like,
it's funny because almost every client I go to has some tool that I'd never heard of. That's it might not be startup, but it's got they have this little niche thing that they created and solved it for, and they went out and found this particular number of clients. And I think you look at those, and then I take the the Microsoft model, right? Which is just do everything. And if you don't do it, buy it, buy it from somebody else, and then, and integrate it in, so that's kind of where you start to look at, where those little niche gaps are. And I think you mentioned too, like, to me, identity is one of those spaces where it's just so complicated. There's a ton of companies out there who make money just making it easier to manage Microsoft's identity platform, right? Like, that's all they have to do.
Yeah, no, it does make sense. And I think the other aspect that I find fascinating is that people in cybersecurity often talk about this whole best of breed versus best of suite, or a point solution versus platform approach. While in reality, if you make 10, 20, 40 steps back, you come to realize that none of those have anything to do with security. Like, the technology industry as a whole has always been going through two different stages of development, or however you choose to describe them. There is the bundling aspect and there is the unbundling aspect, right? It doesn't matter if you're talking about security or if you're talking about other areas of technology. For example, if you take let's just say a customer relationship management software, and you say, okay, how do uh, how do you start a new company in that space? Well, you probably need to find an area that is currently underserved, or maybe find an emerging area. Let's just say there is a new way to market something to companies. Let's just say it's probably not going to be email, because email has been established for a long time. It's probably not going to be mail. It's going to be something else. Like, let's just say it's some new emerging social media trend, like Blue Sky is new. So you're going to start a company and you will say, hey, we do Blue Sky advertisement really, really well. Well, you're going to start there. You're going to maybe dominate the niche, build a great product, and then over time, as you're trying to grow, you will start taking a stab at areas that have already been around for a long time, right? You will go to X, you will go to LinkedIn, then you will start expanding into email. And then what started as a point solution will over time try to become a platform. Some companies will be successful, others won't. Some companies will get acquired, others will go out of business. Some may build a fairly, a nice and sustainable business around around their core area of focus. And so when we look at security, we are often forgetting that point solutions versus platforms, they're not necessarily in battle with one another. They're not competing approaches. It's an evolutionary way where something new emerges. A startup or a young company finds a way to solve it. They do it better than the legacy companies. And then over time, they either become a platform themselves by trying to expand into different areas, or they get consumed by an existing platform. And so it's a continuous process. It's an evolutionary process. So I do think that the number of point solutions versus the number of platforms is going to very much be defined by the main driver for cybersecurity purchases. If more companies are going to start buying security solutions to just check the box, then it makes sense to just work with one vendor. It checks as many boxes as possible. But if more companies are starting to actually care about the capabilities offered by those solutions, then there is going to be more and more of those competitive bake-offs. And as a result, smaller startups will stand a chance.
That's profound. I like that's now I'm looking back after you said all that and thinking about, back in the day when we used to do IDS bake-offs because we had to have the best one, and now everybody's like, just give me the PAN box, the Fortinet box, the Azure, whatever. I don't care. I need all my firewall stuff. So and I think it's good for those who are working in the space and the business to think about, because you have two options there. If you find that niche and you do it really well, you can continue to be better than everybody else at it. But you're gonna tap out. Like, you're gonna continue to be an X number of company that serves X number of clients, really does really well and leads in that space. Or you can start to branch out and make yourself bigger so that you can, if you want to generate more revenue, it's the continual growth model, right? So I think that's something good for business owners to think about. So Ross, this is awesome. I appreciate your time, man. Where can everybody find you on the interwebs?
LinkedIn. I'm fairly active on LinkedIn. That is the only social media platform that I'm actually active on. Ross Haleliuk is the LinkedIn LinkedIn profile. Check it out. I am also fairly active in the blogging space. I have a blog about the business side of the cybersecurity industry called Venture in Security. Check that out. It's ventureinsecurity.net. And in general, say hi if I can be of help.
Yeah, I love the website. It helps me stimulate my posts sometimes, as you've seen.
Awesome.
Well, Ross, thanks for your time. I'm sure we'll have you back again sometime.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for enjoying Keyboard Samurai Podcast. If you'd like to engage, find Will on LinkedIn at /WillClue or visit at willclue.me. That's WILKLU.me for more info. Disconnecting now. Synac you later.